We're Carter and Caleb from City Cycles, and as a shop, we do multiple overnight bike packing trips every year, and we get a lot of questions about how best to set up your bike.
Between the two of us, we have fairly different approaches to accomplishing that goal, so we're going to go over how we do that here in this video.
All right, so I like to break up my bike into 3 zones. The first being my closet right up here. This is where I keep all my clothing. It's somewhat readily accessible. Zone 2 is where I keep all my daily nutrition. This is everything from behind the handlebars and between the seat posts right here. And this is where I keep my phone, my navigation device if I have one, spare batteries, daily nutrition and snacks, kind of stuff that I'll need to access throughout the day, as well as like eating utensils, small things like that. Zone 3 will be where I keep, right back here, everything behind the saddle is where I keep my sleep system. So this is my sleeping bag, my tent, sleeping pad, stuff that I will not need to access throughout the day at all. It just stays back here untouched for most of my riding. Alrighty, so up here in zone 1, the closet, I'm generally carrying almost all of my clothing. On the bottom tier of the basket where I'll have to rifle through stuff are articles of clothing like, like a sleep t-shirt or something that I'm not going to be needing to access throughout the day. On the top layer of the bag is generally where I'm going to carry, depending on the weather, like a spare layer, a fleece or something for when we stop. We're at a gas station for a couple minutes and all that sweat starts to cool off. You get a little bit chilly. A rain jacket. You always need to carry a rain jacket, especially in this part of the country. You never know when a storm can blow in. If I need extra water, I do, if I know that my trip will have a long distance between resupplies, I'll carry an extra water bladder up there as well. And then depending on how much clothing I have up there, I have a hip pack that, let's say it's cooler weather or I need to carry, quite a bit more water or something like that. And this bag is a little bit more full. I'll wear this around my waist just to carry, and this carries a lot of my tools, my flat kit and all that. If, I'm packing a little bit lighter and I don't have quite as much clothing or water, I'll go ahead and put this in the closet just so that I don't have that extra weight on my hips there kind of weighing me down. It's just a lot more comfortable that way. And of course, clothing varies a lot. That's a whole separate video and discussion. We'll kind of deep dive on that, but key takeaways are stuff that not using throughout the day is on the bottom of the bag. Stuff that I will be using throughout the day is right there on the top where I can quickly grab it. And the reason that I've chosen to put clothing up here is because it's lightweight. And I don't want to be steering a big heavy sleep system or just a large amount of food or anything like that up there. So that's really why I've chosen to keep it up front, and it's worked really well for me over the last couple years. All right, so in zone 2, kind of midship area, I've got a couple things going on up here. So I've got, my little stem bag, cockpit bag right here. That's where I'm going to keep all of my my navigation, my phone primarily is what I use for that. And that's just super easily accessible in and out really quickly. I don't like to have it mounted on my handlebars just because I don't want to be staring at a screen all day. It runs down my battery, all that stuff. But it is easily accessible when I need to make a turn or I'm not sure where I'm going. And I can also communicate with folks and let them know where I'm going. I also keep a Bic lighter right up there. It's just a handy place to keep it. I always know it's going to be there. And it's just kind of a little good cradle for it on the side of the stem pouch right here. In the frame bag, carries kind of a lot of miscellaneous things. So I have my power bank. I'm probably going to be using this throughout the day, especially on a longer ride when I need to navigate a lot more or I've never been there before. So I keep that handy right up there, and then I'll oftentimes just run the power cable right out of the frame bag and into my stem bag, just so that I don't need to, I don't lose that quick accessibility. I'm doing my best to move everything over to USB-C outside of my iPhone, which is on Lightning, just so that I need to carry less cables, but I do have a couple extra cables for my lights if I need to charge those. And then I also carry nutrition. So nutrition kind of floats between the frame bag and the cockpit throughout the day. Waffles, gas station snacks, drink mixes, anything like that. That's where I'm going to keep it, just because I'm going to be pulling that out throughout the day. And I really want to have that handy. The main thing that will be in there is a water bladder. So this is my primary water storage right here. I mentioned I had some kind of overflow extra water bladder that I kept up front. That kind of depends on the trip and everything, but I pretty much always use this larger one. I just run the hose right out of the frame bag and tuck the tip of it right into the between the rails of the basket. And this carries, I think this one is a good, this is 72 ounces. So quite a few water bottles will fit in this, and because it's a bladder, you can fit it into oddly shaped spaces like a frame bag and really take up all the space in there and not be wasting space. So that's really handy, and I use that a lot. And then, kind of some just other miscellaneous things. I've got tent stakes maybe in there, any other little odd and end that just doesn't seem to have a spot will usually end up in the frame bag, just because there's always a kind of an awkward little nook or cranny that I can jam stuff into. And then throughout the day, as I'm eating things, trash, where I put it, I have a couple mesh pockets in my frame bag, the side pockets on my stem. I'll usually utilize those to get rid of the old trash from my nutrition throughout the day. Alrighty, so we've moved on now to finally zone 3, the back of the bike, everything behind the saddle, which in my case is just the rear rack and the panniers back here. So something I kind of want to quickly point out is just how modular these panniers are and how they can collapse and carry more or less depending on how much gear you need to carry, which is really handy. In really extreme cases, when you're in pretty fair weather and you have a long resupply, time between resupplies, you can even leave them open on the top and just fill it to the brim almost, and just buckle it shut very loosely, and carry a lot of stuff in here. Or for shorter overnights, you can just roll the bag down, get that waterproofing going, and that's just kind of a nice feature of panniers that I like. But I'll go through my right hand pannier first. So in here, I keep a first aid kit. It's nothing crazy, just some antiseptic stuff, Band-Aids, Neosporin, that sort of thing. It's in a waterproof bag too. I also keep my cook system in here. So I normally run a 2-pot system. I don't have my second pot at the moment. I'm not sure where it went. But both pots are made out of titanium. They're super light, very thin walled. And I have a larger one, and then I have my mug. So this is what I typically make coffee out of or drink out of in the morning while I'm making breakfast. And then I have a larger pot. I've got the lid to it right here that I actually make the food in. Both are pretty easy to clean. That's something to keep in mind. A lot of times I'll just use a little piece of paper towel or something to just clean them out before I go to bed in the night and then before I put it back in. I always carry a pretty large fuel canister just because I'm paranoid about it running out. That's the worst thing ever is not having fuel halfway through a trip. So I always carry a pretty big one. And then I have this little Snow Peak titanium stove. It's very small, super light. I found that you generally don't need a huge stove. These things still get really hot pretty quickly. It's lasted me forever, and it just folds away really nicely like that. Also carry a water filter. This one just screws into like your typical smart water bottle or life water bottle, whatever it is, and you can just squeeze water through there. I don't use this that often, at least here in Oklahoma. There's plenty of places to stop and get, resupplying water, but always good to have just in case. So I also keep a second lighter just in case I need to start a fire or, start my stove. Don't want to be without one of those. Utensils. I also carry my headlamp in here. I really rarely use this throughout the day, so I always keep it back here. It's got a couple different brightnesses on there. It's rechargeable with a USB-C, so it's pretty easy to charge and keep topped off. And then past that, we move into my sleep system. I like an inflatable sleep mat just because it folds down so much smaller than the closed cell foam mats or self-inflating mats out there. And they're also just a lot more comfortable, these inflating ones are. They are prone to popping. You can get a patch kit that weighs nothing and patch them up if it does happen, but I really like these. And I think that's it for this guy. Yep. So the other side, left-hand pannier, is where I keep my tent and my sleeping bag. So here I've got my rain fly in the base of the tent. And then a down sleeping bag. This is actually a hybrid sleeping bag, so it's both down and synthetic. The bottom of it is synthetic so that when it gets wet and you sweat in it, it doesn't lose its insulation. I really like down, not so much for the weight, but just because it compresses so much smaller. Synthetic insulation tends to stay warmer when it gets wet or damp, but generally I don't have too many issues with that, especially being in a nice tent. And being fully enclosed and out of the elements. So I really like this sleeping bag. I've had it for years. It's done me really well. Depending on the tent I'll have, I just got this tent, so I actually haven't figured out how I'm going to carry these poles because they're a little bit longer than my previous ones were. That's kind of part of the process, right? You need to go on a few rides with all the equipment you have and try to figure out the best nooks and crannies and places to put it. I might end up building like a tube for these. I don't know yet. We'll see. But yeah, so I'm still figuring out where I'm going to put my tent poles right now, but we'll figure it out eventually. So yeah. So I just wanted to go into a little bit more detail on why I chose kind of a hybrid setup where I'm going with a more traditional rear rack and panniers, as well as a rack up front, and kind of the pros and cons of that system. So really for me, what's huge is modularity, and racks are super modular. You can strap stuff to them, you can hang panniers off of them. They're super strong. You can strap a load of firewood onto there if you get into a state park and they've got some for sale and roll it down to your campsite. They're just really strong, bomb-proof. Not a lot can go wrong with them, and you can put almost anything on there. They are a little bit heavier, which obviously makes climbing and riding throughout the day a little bit trickier sometimes. But another kind of untouted feature of racks is that when you're rolling down the road, especially on a gravel road, the vibration that runs up through the wheels and into the frame of the bike is actually dissipated partially into the movement and the swaying of the rack. So both front and rear, I'll watch them gyrate at a much higher frequency than I'm feeling, rolling down the road on the bike. And it really soaks up a lot of that road vibration and kind of takes some punishment off your hands and feet and butt as you're rolling down the road. So I really like racks. They're super simple. They're bomb-proof. They're inexpensive. And then panniers can also be quickly lifted off. So when I get to camp, I pull them off, I set up my tent, and then I throw the panniers themselves into my tent just to make sure that animals and other stuff don't get into my food or anything like that throughout the night, which is really nice. They're also waterproof, and then the basket doesn't come off quite as easily, but you can fit a variety of items in there. This one also, like I mentioned with the panniers, can kind of expand or contract depending on what your needs are throughout the day. And then my front rack also holds my dynamo light. So that's kind of a really convenient, I really like that low pointing light, especially when you're bike packing, because up here at the cockpit, mounting it on your handlebars, is kind of has some drawbacks because now you can't have, you know, a bag that comes up above the handlebars. It'll block the headlight. So I really like to have my headlight low underneath the front rack there where it's out of the way and just illuminating the road ahead of me. So yeah, and then of course taking advantage of this empty frame space here is always a good idea. And that's where kind of the more modern bike packing bags come into play. Filling up some of these odd nooks and crannies, and also putting the heaviest part of my setup, the water, right here, kind of midship in zone 2, really helps to balance the bike a lot better and just makes it handle substantially better. So yeah, that's kind of my reasoning for choosing this bag and rack setup. And Caleb will go into his reasons, you know, in the next clip.
So as opposed to Carter, who has kind of the pannier basket set up, I have just bike packing bags that all just strap onto my bike. So for the front here, I've got my sleep system. In the top here, I've kind of my immediate access items. In my saddle bag, I have some cooking and equipment, and then my changes of clothes, and then kind of everything else like food and other miscellaneous items I have here in my frame bag. So yeah, I'll just kind of break it open and show you what I got. So up here in the front handlebar roll, on one side, it's kind of sectioned off into 2 parts. So on one side I have my tent, and then my sleeping bag, an inflatable roll, and I just bought this pillow, you know, if I'm feeling extra soft. And then on the other side, I've got the rain fly and the ground mat. So the stuff that kind of gets wet potentially and more dirty, I keep separate from the stuff that I want to not get destroyed by the weather or rocks or anything like that. So I kind of section them off, and it seems to work pretty well for me. I have the stakes that I just kind of like strap onto the top of it as well. And those work pretty well for me in terms of just kind of getting them out of the way, and they don't really rattle all that much whenever it's all cinched down really nice and tight. So here in the top tube bag, I don't carry all that much stuff. So the stuff I have in there right now is just basically the idea is just be able to grab it super quickly. So sunscreen, like reapplying multiple times a day, that's handy. It makes me actually want to do it instead of if I had to like dig through a bunch of bags, I would never put this on. A little knife, great for cooking and just generally like if random stuff kind of needs cutting, that's good. A lighter, and then I'd usually have like my wallet and phone, but then kind of almost the most necessary item in there is like very easy access sugar. So I really like Skittles for that, or just something that's just super basic like candy that I would be happy to eat kind of at all times of the day. And the reason for that is like, at least for me, like being able to have that sugar readily available will like really help me to not like overextend essentially and get to a spot where I'm now like sugar deficient and I'm like struggling to pedal my bike. So being able, like I said, like similar philosophy with the sunscreen, being able to get it quickly, not have to dig through stuff is like going to be crucial for me maintaining a good sort of ride. And so, yeah, that's just kind of my philosophy with my top tube bag. All right, so for my frame bag, that is kind of the catch-all for everything that isn't like sleep system, clothes, and my cooking stove. So that includes battery banks, med kits, headlamp, stakes, and kind of eating supplies like plates and utensils. And the biggest thing that I have in there generally is food that I want to be able to eat throughout a ride that I can't get at a gas station. So, you know, if I'm looking to, like on this last ride, I really liked combining like chips that I'd get from a gas station and a little packet of tuna. So being able to just bring that with me and pull the tuna out is really nice along the ride. And for me, all this stuff is never anything that I generally should hopefully need very quick access to. It's not the most organized in there. It's kind of just a black hole, a cavernous wasteland. So I have to rummage through things to get it. It's not super great, but because the stuff I need better quick access, more organization to, I have in the top tube bag. So most everything else is just easily able to just kind of be rummaged through. So that's what it is. The frame bag is just very much a catch-all for me, but has a lot of essentials. All right, final area that I've got is my saddle bag. Just for representation, I have a hoodie in here. This would be a horrible item to generally bring because it's super bulky, but clothes is what this is supposed to represent. I carry all my clothes back here, and then the only kind of other item besides clothes and maybe like an AeroPress is a towel. Like these are kind of those swim towels, like quick drying, and then my cooking setup. So this is kind of one of those burner setups where you can throw it all together pretty quickly. And this thing is awesome. Just kind of put it on there like that. And this will heat water up insanely quickly, these jet boil styles. So I like it a lot. And it does a great job of just being able to get really compact and be super powerful. And it's super easy to clean. I haven't had any issues with it so far. So yeah, I highly recommend that sort of a setup. But yeah, the kind of idea behind all this stuff is like, maybe besides a rain jacket that I would have at the very end of the bag to be able to like quickly access, I really don't want to ever have to get into this bag during a ride. It would only occur whenever I've reached the campsite for that night. So that is the saddle bag. So the reason that I have gone with bike packing bags over a rack or anything like that is because this bike doesn't have rack mounts. So there are ways with tail fin and other methods to be able to attach racks. Racks are great, but in general, I do like the idea of like this setup is transferable to kind of any bike that I'd want to put it on essentially, including this one. And I really like this bike, so that's the origins of where I got this setup, was to set this bike up. So yeah, as you can see, just no hardware back here at all to speak of, and then nothing up front. So I like the versatility a lot that comes with these. I would say sort of space-wise, amount of volume that I have does definitely, I have to be much more conscious of it than you can. Like panniers are amazing for just being able to like have huge volume and just easily be able to throw stuff in there. I don't have that luxury here, so I have to be a little bit choosier, but in general, for like the trips I'm doing, which are not very long, not super intense. This setup has worked out great for me. So bike packing was something that intimidated me for a long time, and I had gone camping before and I had done plenty of cycling, but never combined the two. And the reason was because I feared that if I didn't have the right equipment, then I was going to fail. And you know, I own a bike shop now. It's easy for me to get the equipment. So thankfully I have been able to get on a decent setup. But through realizing I've done a lot of growth over the years of basically realizing like, I'm not going to do it perfectly the first time ever, even if I have the perfect equipment for the task. I can sit and research stuff all day, but like ultimately, like what works for somebody may not work for my application. So just getting out there, trying it, being not afraid to fail, has been a huge sort of point of growth for me over the years. And I've really enjoyed going on these bikepacking trips. I'm still a newbie in the grand scheme of things by a long shot. So I have a lot to learn. I can dial my setup in more, all that sort of stuff. But that is all super entertaining and fun to me. And I hope that if you kind of have some fear over that you can find the confidence to kind of get over that and go for it, because it's well worth it.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that a little bit, like, you know, here in Tulsa anyways, in the next month or so, we're going to be doing a bike packing trip that's 30 miles from the shop and 30 miles back. Like, that's such an accessible ride. You really don't need a ton of technical equipment to do that. You could just strap on a backpack, put some camping gear in there and go. It may not be perfect, and it's never going to be perfect. You're never going to be totally optimized. So don't let a lack of equipment hold you back. And even if you don't live in the Tulsa area, I really encourage you to look at some cool local rides you could do. They guarantee you there's an awesome adventure you can go on with nothing but a backpack. And as you progress as a rider, you know, and you move further and further into your bikepacking journey, kind of, you can expand, get better gear, get a better bike, all that stuff. But the bike you have and the gear you have will almost certainly, you know, get you out for even just a quick night, overnighter. You know, don't underestimate the power of just taking a quick trip, you know. It can be really restorative and a very transformative experience. So, yeah.